Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying time is here. Today we're talking about the Mad Max films. This is a series of films that started in 1979 and were directed by George Miller. This series is awesome. It has high octane action unlike any other franchise. Forget your Fast and Furious movies. Forget your Need for Speeds. Forget your Gone in 60 Seconds. This is the definitive high octane, high speed action film franchise. And without further ado, I'm going to give you my ranking from worst to best. Coming in at number 4 is 1979's seminal classic, Mad Max. Unfortunately, the first film out is the worst film out. This film was directed by George Miller back in 1979 and was Mel Gibson's first major motion picture, and kind of put him on the map, and that basically led to his mainstream success later on in the 80s. This film is high octane, it's awesome, it's action packed, but it does have a problem, and that's the second act. The film starts off strong with a really cool opening sequence, and then it grinds to a halt for about 30 to 35 minutes. And then it picks up again in the third act very well. But unfortunately, the second act is just kind of a slog, and that is unfortunate. Look at that original poster. That is awesome. Of course, he never wears that mask in the movie. I don't understand what that's all about. But a lot of posters back in the day were misleading. This film is entertaining, and it was George Miller's first film. He was a dentist by trade, if I'm not mistaken. And he decided to try to make a movie, and he did a damn good job. This is an amateur film, essentially. It's a first-time director in George Miller, but they did a damn good job. It is a good movie. It does have its flaws, and I will absolutely admit that they could have, probably had another pass at the script to make it flow better, because there is about a good chunk of this movie, let's say the second act, that's kind of a slog. But that first and third act do make up for it, and I do recommend the original Mad Max. One of the few franchises where the first film is the weakest, but still very entertaining. 79's Mad Max. Check it out. Coming in at number 3 is 1985's Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, starring Tina Turner as Anti-Entity. This was the first and only PG-13 Mad Max film, and it shows Max helping this group of tribal children across the wasteland to try to find a new home. Although, personally, I think they left a better home for a rundown city, but that's just me. Chronologically, I believe this is actually the fourth film, but it is the third one released. And it shows Tina Turner play Anti-Entity and runs this town called Bartertown, and Mel Gibson's character, Mad Max, must take her on in an attempt to give these kids safe passage to another home. It's a cool and interesting premise for a sequel. It wasn't just trying to be the first two films. 1 and 2 are very similar to each other, and this one changed it up, and I do think this is an underrated film. It's not perfect, but it is an enjoyable, fun action blockbuster, and one that I do recommend. 85's Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Give it a shot. Coming in at number 2, and maybe controversially to some, is 1981's Mad Max 2, also known as Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, also known as The Road Warrior. This was the first Mad Max film that had major widescreen appeal even after its release. The first Mad Max film did very well at the box office, I think making around $100 million back in 1979. But it wasn't the biggest hit in the States. The sequel, on the other hand, was much different. This time, Max goes up against this villain named Lord Humongous, this just really beefy, screwed up, post-apocalyptic warrior, and he must take him and his gang on in order to help these people across the wasteland who are transporting gasoline, which has become the most viable resource in the land. This is an awesome action film that from start to finish is just high octane and doesn't slow down. This is what Mad Max 1 wanted to be. This is a great sequel, and I'd say it's Mel Gibson's first great movie, and I do love this film. If we're even speaking objectively, considering the fact that the budget and all that, this might be the best movie in the franchise. but it's not my favorite. I do have to admit that the film that I'm going to rank after this one is slightly better, but still an enjoyable film. And when people think Mad Max, they usually think of this movie. Coming in at number 1 is 2015's Mad Max Fury Road. This film surprised the hell out of me. Most modern day blockbusters I don't find to be that interesting. I do think some of them are good. You can still have good modern movies. But when it comes to blockbusters, in more recent years, they've become very formulaic. And they don't really offer a lot, that keeps you want to come back for more. But this film is different. This film is mostly practical effects. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's George Miller's best film, I would say. And it's just intense as hell. There's nothing about this film that I do not like, and I think it's one of the best action films in the past decade. This time around, the villain of the movie is a guy named Immortan Joe, played by Hugh Keays-Byrne, which is interesting because Hugh Keays actually, here he is right here, he actually played the villain in the first Mad Max, Toe Cutter, and this time he came back all these years later to play a villain again. He sadly passed on, but he is a great villain, and Max must team up with Furiosa to transport his brides, these women who are essentially subjugated to his wants and desires against their will. He's a very nasty and sick villain, and Max and Furiosa must take him on, kick his ass, steal his babes, and save the day. This was an awesome film. It's intense from beginning to end, and I think it's absolutely the best of the franchise. But there is one thing about it that I do not like, and that's that they replaced Mel Gibson with Tom Hardy. Tom Hardy does a good job in the movie. He is not a bad Mad Max. He's actually a really good Mad Max. This is a cool collector's edition booklet that came with it. It's a little comic book. But unfortunately, Mel Gibson was completely viable to play the character. Hell, an older, more experienced Mad Max, I think, would have made this story more interesting. But unfortunately, they decided just to go against that and just go with a new actor. I don't think Mel Gibson was sore about it. He even showed up to the premiere, and he seemed to be happy enough. But unfortunately, he just was replaced by Tom Hardy. And as much as I like Tom Hardy and think he's great, there's really no reason he should have been Mad Max in this movie. It could have just been Mel Gibson again. But apart from that, I do enjoy the film. And that one gripe, though it is one that does annoy me, is not enough to put this film down past the number 1 spot. It is the best Mad Max film, and one that I highly recommend. There's some stills from the original film. Look at Mel Gibson there. Look at his face. All in all, an entertaining franchise through and through. One that has great action, one that's imaginative and original, and one that shows, a franchise that shows, even if you don't have much experience in making a movie, if you go out there and do it, you might make something really special, and something that can last throughout the years. There was also a really badass Mad Max video game that was released on the PS4 and Xbox One a few years back. One that I do recommend. If you have a modern console, I recommend checking this game out. It's pretty badass. There was also an NES game released back in I believe the 80s. One that I would like to own, but it's not really that great. But regardless, it is cool the fact that Max has gone on to other forms of media as well, besides just movies. That's my list. I appreciate you all for watching. Let me know your list down below if you'd like. And peace out.